Okay, so doing dimensions for your drafts. It's pretty simple. This is something that you kind of do at the end. Obviously, once you have drawn your blocks, you've done your title box, you've done your border all the way around. Now we need to include our dimensions so that a craftsman who is looking at your draft and is like, hey, I need to build this, they actually know the dimensions and know how big to build this thing. We are doing most of our drafts 1 to 2 centimeters. So what that's saying is 1 centimeter on this paper is actually 2 centimeters in real life. So you can see my actual block like this is pretty much twice the size or half the size of this block. This block is twice the size of my draft, right? So when we're putting in our dimensions, we're putting in the real life dimensions. We're not putting the actual size of this line on the paper, which would be what is half? 12 and a half. So this would be not 6 1/4. Even though the line on here is 6 1/4 centimeters, we're actually going to write 12.5 centimeters so that the person who is looking at this draft and is creating something, they will make this block 12 and a half centimeters wide, not this tiny little block here. All right, you guys can see right here that I've written lines equals 10 millimeters, overhang equals 2 millimeters, and space equals 2 millimeters. I'll talk about that in a second. If you want to write this on a separate piece of paper so you can remember that, I would suggest you do that, but I'm going to explain these dimensions in a second. Before I do anything, I'm going to go over five little rules that you should be thinking about, five pieces of advice really as well when you're doing dimensions, okay? And then when I actually start making my dimensions lines, I'll explain each single one a little bit more specifically, all right? So first and foremost, write very lightly, like super light. I'm using a 2H pencil. I'm gonna make all my lines and all my numbers 2H using my 2H pencil first. And then I will darken my lines afterwards with an HB pencil. If you're using an HB pencil right off the hop, that's fine, but guys, you have to write very lightly, okay? Second, all your dimensions should go on the outside of your blocks. So what I mean by that is all your dimensions should be on the outsides of your blocks, okay? Yes, there are lines on the inside, but you don't actually put your dimensions inside the block. You wouldn't put any dimensions in this little space here, or right there. All your dimensions should be on the outside. If you remember how we actually do these 3 blocks, we have to create a huge square around the all 3 blocks, and then you just start drawing your tiny little boxes on the inside of those blocks. Think about that. Think about that big square that goes around your entire piece. Those dimensions should be on the outside of that big square. All right. Third thing, identify which surfaces need to be dimensioned, and then make your lines. All right. So I can see that there's a lot of lines here, a lot of surfaces that need to be dimensioned. If you're not sure what needs to be dimensioned, I mean, it doesn't hurt to actually just start drawing your lines anyways. For instance, like there's this little gap right here, right? Or not this little gap, but this little ledge that goes up. We do need to dimension that because that's a very unique little shape, right? You need to dimension this part right here because we need to know how high this goes up. You need to obviously do the dimensions of your overall size of your block. So that one, that one, that one. Remember, since this is the right side, right? The dimensions of this guy is the exact same dimensions of that right there. So you need to be aware of that as well. When you're doing your lines, so the fourth rule here, when you're doing your lines to make your life a lot easier, do all your horizontal lines first. So you make all your lines horizontally, and then once you've made your lines, then we'll do all the vertical lines that we need to do. All right, so that will make your life a lot easier instead of going from T square, draw your line, and then you gotta grab your triangle and you draw your vertical line, and then you switch over to your T square. It's just very hard. So what I suggest you guys do is draw all your horizontal lines first and then fill in all the vertical lines that you can do afterwards. All right. And then the fifth one, the last one that I'm talking about here, is you do not need to put a dimension for every single surface. So what I mean is you don't need to put a line there, or you don't need to put a dimension for this one, and then 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 go over to your right side and do all the dimensions of each of those surfaces either. It is expected for a person who's looking at this draft to do a little bit of math. So what I mean by that here is, for instance, if I do the dimensions of this surface here and then do the dimensions of this surface here, I don't need to do that third one. My total dimension, which I said earlier was 12.5 centimeters, right? That lines up with this block here. So really, if I do this dimension and then I do this dimension, a person who's looking at this draft should do a little bit of math and already kind of figure out how big that piece, this line right here already is, just by taking this number and subtracting it from the overall size of this block. All right, so you don't need to do every single surface. It is expected that a person looking at this draft should do a little bit of math. All right, so now that I got rid of those 5 like little rules and tidbits, let's actually get into this. So, what I know for sure that I need to dimension is the overall size of each block. All right, so I'm gonna do all my horizontal lines first. I'm gonna grab my 2H pencil. All right, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna draw a very light line. Now that line right there that I just drew is very long, but I just want to make sure you guys can actually see it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the other side and I'm gonna draw a light line there. I know I have a dimension there, so I'll draw a light line there. Do another one right there. All right, I'm gonna go back to this side and draw a light line. My horizontal line there. Light horizontal line there. I'll do one over here just in case I do need to make a little horizontal line there. All right, now that I got all those horizontal lines, I'm gonna do all my vertical lines now. So I need to do a vertical line here, one right there to line up with that side, and then another one right there. I'm gonna go down here at the bottom of my block here because I need the overall size of my block here, so I'll do a line there, do a line there, and also on my right side. All right, so you can see that I have all these lines sticking out. And do you notice how they're on the outside of my block? I'm not doing any lines on the inside. So right here, you don't want to do a dimension like this. Don't put any dimensions in there. Okay, because really at the end of the day, this size right here, that dimension should go up there. Same with right here. I don't want to do any dimensions on the inside of my block like this, right? Because again, these dimensions should be up here. All right, so I'm gonna erase these guys that we don't need. All right, now we're gonna get into what these measurements here. Now the line's 10 millimeters. That is the line that will encase your number. The overhang is exactly as I said, the name says, is that there's a little bit of an overhang. And then the space, 2 millimeters, the space is how far away that line should be from your block. All right, so I'm gonna zoom into one particular space here so that we can really see this. All right, I got an eraser here. I got my pencil, and I should really have an eraser shield. Eraser shield. Okay, so now I got my eraser shield here. So what I'm gonna do is, now that I have that line drawn there, I'm gonna measure 2 millimeters away from the block. Wow, look at that. Okay, I already did 2 millimeters. I just eyeballed that, but impress myself every day. Just joking. Okay, this one is only 1 millimeter, so I do need to erase that little gap a little bit. I need to make space, so I'm gonna use my eraser shield. And I'm going to erase 1 millimeter away from the block. And then now that space is 2 millimeters. Cool runnings. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 10 millimeters. Now I'm going to give you guys a little cheat here, okay? The dimensions I said, the overhang is 2 millimeters and then your line is 10 millimeters. Well, really, you can just add those up to get 12 millimeters, and we can just measure out 12 millimeters here. So, I'm gonna use my line. I'm gonna mark at the 10 millimeters, which is 1 centimeter, and then I'm gonna mark another 2 millimeters out. So I have those 2 little dots there. All right, and then what I'm gonna do is, so that there's no confusion, I'm gonna take my eraser shield, and I'm gonna erase the rest of that line. So now my dimension lines, I have the 10 millimeter line right there, plus that 2mm overhang, plus that 2mm space between the block and my line. I'm gonna clean up this little space just a little bit, make it a little bit nicer looking. Okay, I'm gonna darken this line so you guys can really see. Notice how I did not make those marks on the other side of the line, all right? So let's darken this bad boy just a little bit. All right, cool. Now the reason why I didn't make those marks on the other line is because if I use a T-square, I can just bring that over. So now I'm gonna go to the 10mm line, and I'm gonna draw a line across. Now when I do the line across, I like to leave a little gap. It makes it easier so I don't have to do any erasing there. Okay, so I just left a gap in the middle there. I know my block, the real life size of my block is 12.5 centimeters. 12.5 centimeters. So I'm gonna write in the middle 12.5 centimeters. All right. And then I'm going to darken those lines. All right. And then what I like to do here is I'll take the T-square and I'll line it up to that overhang, right at the edge of that overhang, and I'm going to erase the rest of this overhang here. Beauty. All right, so now that I have that there, I'm gonna darken my other side. Where's the T-square? There it is. All right. And then the last thing that we gotta do with this line here is we gotta do our arrowheads. This is the technique I want you guys to use for the arrowheads. Now that you have those lines drawn in here, when we draw the arrowhead, I want you guys to start the pencil right on where those lines intersect and make one line out, and then I'm gonna go back to the bottom and go again, one line out like so. What I don't wanna see from you guys is doing something like this, where you double up the lines. Reason being is if you take a look right here, that point has now gone past my line, right? There's also times where you have a line like that and you do this, your point might not be lined up right to the middle of the line. It's not going to look good. So when you guys are ever doing your dimension lines, always start the pencil right on the intersection and then go out, and then start the pencil again on the intersection and then go out. That guarantees that your point is going to be right in the middle of your line. That's how you do a basic line. Now there are going to be dimensions where you have to double up your lines, and basically what I mean by that is you're going to be putting multiple dimensions on one line, and I'll explain this right now. Sorry guys, I just want to make a little edit here. I know that I got a lot of numbers here and you might be a little bit confused. I'm gonna not have all this in a second here, but I just want to explain something that I forgot to when I initially started recording. These lines coming out here, since I had 3 dimensions, then that means I had to do 3 10mm lines. I did 10, a 10, and a 10 sticking out, plus that 2mm overhang. For here, these smaller lines on the inside, they are going to be 10mm plus the 2mm overhang, right? So you can see that 5 there is 10mm plus the 2mm overhang. Since the 6.5 centimeter coming out here is twice that distance, that means it should be 22 millimeters. So you can see how my line here lines up with the 20 millimeters, and then also that little 2mm overhang. And then finally the lines that go on the way on the outside, well then that should be 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 2 is 32 millimeters. So I lined that up, and you can see that my line here is 32 millimeters. Just so you don't get kind of confused. Alright, I'm going to erase all of this. Alright, so I made these lines darkened already to kind of save time, so I can show you guys this quickly. Note those little notches there. Those notches are important. I'm going to explain why they're important. First of all, those dimensions I was talking about before in terms of the space, 2 millimeters. If you notice each one of these lines here, they are 10 millimeters. All All right, and now since I'm using multiple lines to do one side of a dimension, I need to draw more 10 millimeter lines. Now for this bottom line, you can see that it sticks out all the way, and then this one sticks out all the way. The longest line should be your overall dimension, so the entire size of this, or the entire height of this block here. Okay, and then you can see that there's lines that get a little bit smaller on the inside. Okay, now when you do the lines on the outside, this line is the only one that needs that 2 millimeter overhang. All right, so you don't need to add 2 millimeter overhangs to these little notches here. However, for the smaller lines, they will have a 2 millimeter overhang. I'll explain in a second here. Okay, so I should just probably write in there 2 millimeter overhang as well. Okay, apologies about that last recording as well, you guys. I was putting tools on top of my phone, which I'm using to record audio, so sorry about all that loud noise. All right, so basically here I'm going to do my overall length first, or my overall height first. So I'm going to line up my vertical line with that notch there, and I'm going to draw a light line across. I'm going to leave a little gap in the middle again, and I know that the total height of my block here is 11 centimeters, so I'm going to draw in 11 centimeters. All right, notice how there's an overhang right on those outside dimension lines, and I'm going to draw my little arrow. Again, remember, put the point of the pencil right where the intersection starts off, and then draw your lines out. I don't want to see any of this, where that line is clearly not in the middle of your pointed arrow, right? So make sure you're using that technique. And I'm going to darken this line here, because that line is good to go. All right. So that's the overall size here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the size of this part right here, which I know is 5 centimeters. So I'm going to draw a line going down. I should have left that gap a little bit bigger, but that's okay. I'm just going to erase that. And I got 5 centimeters. All right. And then I have another one, and I know that this surface here is 6.5 centimeters. So I'm going to draw my line, leave a little bit of a gap, 6.5 centimeters, and then finish my line. Now, do you notice how these smaller overhangs, these smaller lines have those overhangs? Like that overhang is a little bit too long. I need to make that a little bit smaller, but that overhang at the 6.5 centimeters and that 11, that's about the right size for that overhang. So I'm just going to fix up the 5 centimeter overhang. Just a tad bit. Oh, I think I made these lines a little bit too dark. Oh well, that's okay. And then I still need the arrowheads, right? So I need to make my arrowheads on all these dimensions. I could fix up these lines going up and down. But notice how the shortest line starts with this this dimension on the inside, and then all I do is I just increase the distance the dimension lines come away from the block. So you can see the 5, the 6.5, the 11, they all have their own little lines. But notice how the 5 and the 6.5, they all use this bottom line that sticks out all the way. Right? Okay. Now this is the most organized way to do this. You don't need to make the dimension from here to here, because I mentioned before with those rules, people should be doing a little bit of math. So they should figure out that 5 centimeters here and 6.5 centimeters here. That means this gap is 1.5 centimeters. So you don't need to put a dimension there. All right. You can see how one line can be used for multiple dimensions: the 5, the 6.5, and the 11. All right. Okay, and the final thing. I know this video is pretty long. I apologize for that, you guys, but there's a lot of information that I have to go over. So this is the last thing I want to talk about: how you can use the same horizontal lines to make your dimensions. So what I mean here is you have a section of your block here, right here, and then you also have a section of your block here that you need to dimension. Now you don't need to do what I did previously in the video here, where you had dimensions sticking out there and then you had a dimension that sticks out even further. You can keep these dimensions all on the same plane, because, well, really it works out better that way, because these blocks are all in kind of like the same dimension. it's kind of hard to explain. They're all even with each other. They don't stick out. One doesn't stick out further, one doesn't stick out more in. So I'll explain. So again, you have the 2mm gap between your dimension lines and your block. You have the 10-meter line, and then you have your 2mm overhang. Okay, so you still have those parts of your dimension line. I know the size of this between this surface right here is 4.5 centimeters. So I'm gonna write that in, and then I know the size of this guy is 5 centimeters. So I'm gonna write that in. All right, and then what I can do is I can use the T-square. I have my mark for where that 10mm line is, and then I also have a 2mm overhang. So I'm just gonna draw my line that goes across all the dimensions, like so. Okay, so you can see how I'm using the same horizontal line to indicate both of these dimensions. I'm going to do my arrowheads again, like so. And then I'm going to quickly darken these lines. I'm not going to measure exactly because I don't want to make this video any longer than it already is. So I'm just kind of eyeball how long these lines are, like so. And then these lighter lines that are on top, they wouldn't even be showing, right? I would erase them like so. All right, so you can see this whole distance here, if you add those numbers up, is 9.5 centimeters, right? 4.5 plus 5 is 9.5. I don't need to make this dimension because on my front view here, I have it saying it is 12.5 centimeters. So me doing this dimension here is redundant. I don't need to do that. The person looking at this draft should do the math that 9.5 minus 12.5 is 3 centimeters. So they should be able to deduce that this dimension right here is 3 centimeters. All right, I know it's a lot of information, you guys. You can see that there's a lot of different dimensions on these blocks, but what I really want from you guys is at least for sure the overall dimensions. So the width of your front view, right? You definitely need the height of your whole block, right? So this 11 centimeters is sufficient. You don't need to write this 11 centimeters over here. If it's already here, then you're good to go. You don't need to put it over here. Same with up here. I don't need to put the 12.5 centimeters up here if I already have it down here. All right, that's already indicating that this is 12.5 centimeters. All right, what I am missing, however, is the depth. So how wide this right side version is. So I can either write it here, or if I want to, I could also write it up here. So I could also put those dimensions right there. All right. These 2mm, the 10mm, the 2mm, you don't need to write all that in. You just need to write the dimensions of the block. I was just writing this 2 and the 10 and the 10 and the 10 and the 2, just so you guys know how long you should be making your dimensions lines. Good luck!